Hi, everyone. This is Nadia here, the product designer for Verify Pipeline Authoring. And I'm joined together with Dove, the product manager for Verify Pipeline Authoring. And we will talk a little bit about the category maturity scorecard that we've recently ran for the pipeline authoring category. We were able to move the pipeline authoring category to viable, which is great news. So we passed with the score of 4 and success rate of 80%, which is pretty high for minimal category. So actually the score of 4 is place us at lovable level, but of course, because we're at minimal, we were interviewing only internal participants. So we interviewed 5 SREs, GitLab SREs, and 5 of our backend and front-end engineers. And the success rate was 8 out of 10, giving us the 80% success rate. So yeah, we're moving to viable, but I think the main result of this research was the huge amount of insights that we've gotten. So I'm going to go over those insights now and cover some of the main themes that we've uncovered around the pipeline authoring experience. So the different insights that we've uncovered can be roughly divided into 5 categories. So it's learnability and easy onboarding, editor preferences and preferred authoring workflows for authoring your pipeline graph usage and navigation. So using the pipeline graph to navigate between jobs and things like that, pipeline efficiency and general usability improvements. So some of the main insights around learnability had to do with autocomplete features. Dove will talk a bit more about the specific actionable improvements that we'll be making in that area. Users also wanted to see more explanations in YAML templates, so we can use comments to add additional information for how to use the template. And showing contextual documentation. So we have great documentation around CI/CD, but it can be a bit difficult to browse and find the right things there. So it would be great to show contextual documentation in the product. Then the next category of insights had to do with the editor's usage. And the main insights that we got were that proficient CI/CD users like GitLab SREs really prefer to use their local editors. So they want to use a familiar editor that they use all day long for configuring pipelines because they don't need as much support in the product. While those new to CI, for example, some of the front-end and back-end engineers that we've interviewed, they went for the editors inside GitLab. So the pipeline editor, web ID, and even the single file editor. So they felt like they would get more support by using GitLab UI. And some other interesting insights regarding authoring workflows were that the developers really prefer to author pipelines in small iterations. So they would set up maybe one stage, for example, one job, and run it and see how it goes, and then add on to it. So they don't really write out the whole configuration, just because it's easier for them this way to kind of validate small parts of their pipeline. The next category of insights were around the pipeline graph usage. So the main insights there were that the big pipeline graph in the pipeline page really works much better for SREs, or that would be our DevOps engineer persona, or platform engineer, Priyanka, where they can see an overview of a complex pipeline architecture. So it's much more helpful for them. While the mini pipeline graph is really used by everyone just to navigate between jobs and to see the pipeline run. You would see developers using the mini pipeline graph to jump between jobs to view the logs for those jobs. So it's used as a navigation tool rather than a way for you to see how your pipeline is built. And some other interesting insights were around pipeline optimization. So pipeline can take quite a long to run, and building all of the dependencies takes a long time. So once you create your basic pipeline configuration, it might make sense for us to recommend such features as caching, or maybe make recommendations for how to better build an image with all of your necessary dependencies in a way that would make your pipeline faster. The last category were usability improvements, last but not least. We had lots of them, and there were lots of things that not only related to the pipeline authoring team, by the way, but also pipeline execution team. For instance, improvements for troubleshooting errors in logs. So it can be a bit difficult to get from your error or job exit code to the specific place where the error in the logs occurred. So maybe there's an opportunity for us there to make it easier for you to go to that specific line in the logs. Improvements to artifacts documentation. Generally, users found the artifacts documentation quite confusing. Making it easier to get from your local editor or from the terminal where you're running the pipeline or making the commit and pushing the changes to the pipeline configuration, getting from there to the actual pipeline. Maybe that could be streamlined because currently it involves quite some context switching. And a lot of things had to do with just improving the discoverability of the pipeline authoring tools that we currently have. For instance, linking the pipeline editor from all of the different entry points into the CI onboarding workflow. So if you want to dive deeper into these insights, you can find the link in our research issue. And all of the actionable issues are linked in the research issue as well. And now Dove also will go over some of the issues and epics that we have and talk a bit more about how we're going to be turning these insights into action and how it's going to inform our roadmap.
Yes, thank you, Nadia. You and Shell. Yeah, I'm going to call out few epics and explain why we've decided to prioritize that as a part of our roadmap. So I think one of the first insights that we have is that users want to see contextual information. They want to understand what is available for them to use, and want to see what basically what each keyword is doing. And alongside that, we always keep in our mind that a lot of our users don't use the GitLab, the pipeline editor. So I think we can find a route where we can support both users with some of the epics and issues that we have. One of them is the one that I'm presenting right now, which is the improved linting or autocomplete when authoring a pipeline. And the idea is to do it using a JSON schema. So the job to be done, as mentioned here, is that when writing a pipeline, I would like to know what are the available keywords I can use. And when looking at a keyword, I would like to know what this keyword is doing. So we've run a couple of spike issues, one from the front end, one from the back end. And we believe that the best way we can do it is using a JSON schema. Today, there is a schema that is available in the schema store, and it is hosted by a third party. So we believe that GitLab should create, we should create our own schema. Using this schema, user will be able to implement that in the pipeline editor, where we can have the autocomplete functionality, but also we can provide a schema to the user that are they're using their local editor, and they can add it to their local editor, and they can use the autocomplete capability in their local editor. So this way we can balance between the users that are using the pipeline editor and using the user of the local of their local editor. And also with that, we can add a keyword description in the tooltip. We can have the contextual information about linking between the keywords and the documentation and more. So I think the first implementation issue that we have is to generate a CI config language schema whenever the CI config is changed. So we want to have an automatic method on generating a JSON schema, and this is the schema that will support both local editor user and our user, and the thing that we will leverage on in continuing working on autocomplete functionality, linking, tooltips on the keywords, and more. And of course, you can read through the spike issues and the implementation issue, and there will be obviously more into that issue as we move into further and further into iteration. The second epic that I want to call out is the extend pipeline authoring tool to local editor user. So as you mentioned, again, users are using their local editor, and we won't go against their natural instinct. Still, the pipeline editor is our one-stop shop for working with CI, and this is what GitLab is going to focus on, because we are here for selling our customer and using solution and not a point product or a point solution. And we can only do that using the pipeline editor through GitLab UI. But still, whenever we find a way where we can support both users, when we come to a crossroad, we'll say, okay, if we will do the extra mile on the work that we are doing on the editor, similar to the JSON schema as an example, we can also support the local user. So we'll definitely do that. So in that, we are talking and discussing about some of the issues that we can add to our roadmap. And as we will start working on implementation issue, we will start adding them to that epic. Lastly, Nadia mentioned the mini pipeline graph, which is this graph here, and the pipeline, the big pipeline graph. So obviously, we will continue working on improving the pipeline graph, but also the pipeline mini graph is very useful for users of GitLab CI, and we do plan to make this pipeline mini graph a shareable component. We've noticed that it is being used widely across GitLab UI, and we want to make sure we'll have consistency across that important feature. So this is an epic and a design issue where we are planning to work on the pipeline mini graph, make it a shareable component, and then implement it wherever it is on the pipeline UI. One more thing I want to call out is that we've noticed that many of the users that went to GitLab UI, as Nadia mentioned, worked on the pipeline editor, the single file editor, and the web IDE. One of the things that we thought, and we actually will not prioritize, and I want to explain why not and what we will prioritize, is maybe having some callouts on the single file editor and the web IDE for users that are working on GitLab CI, redirecting them to the pipeline editor. But still, if we see the telemetry information, we see that majority of the users eventually find themselves in the pipeline editor. So if we'll add like callouts for the single file editor user or the web IDE, you can see that the reach is very minimal. So it doesn't, in other words, doesn't worth it. So for me, what it tells me that eventually users find themselves in the pipeline editor, and probably users that are using the single file editor or the web IDE are probably doing it for a reason, because the pipeline editor doesn't hold all the features that are available in those solutions. One thing that we do want to make sure we prioritize is make sure that the onboarding experience take the user as quickly as possible to the pipeline editor, because as we mentioned, user found themselves in multiple solutions or pages in GitLab UI to edit our GitLab CI. So the onboarding is definitely something we'll keep working on, making sure the experience is easy, seamlessly, and user find themselves as quickly as possible in the pipeline editor in order to edit their CI configuration. That's it. Any final word, Nadia, that you want to mention, or any other issues that you want to call out?
No, I think that's it. I think we covered all of the major insights and issues. If you want to get additional information around the insights or issues, feel free to dive into the Dovetail project, as well as the research issue where everything is documented. And in Dovetail, you can also watch specific highlights from the interviews that we've run, because the highlights are attached to every insight. So it might be interesting for you if you want to dive deeper into some specific insight and see exactly what happened in the interview.
Cool. I think we can wrap this up. Thanks everyone for watching.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.